Hello, to those of you who celebrate it, Merry Christmas. Welcome to episode 93 of the Filmumentaries podcast. This is Jamie Benning talking to you from my grotto, my house, here in London, UK. Welcome or welcome back. I'm going to skip all the usual talk of ways that you can support the podcast because you've had a year of that, just to give you and me a break from saying it again and you listening to it again. So let's leap right in. I was recently given the opportunity by folks at ILM to talk to two VFX supervisors that worked on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. It's a mouthful. Namely, Jeff Sutherland and Simone Coco. So as you might imagine, I jumped at the chance, and within, I think it was less than 24 hours, we were chatting on Riverside, the platform that I use to record my podcasts these days. In this conversation, we discuss their work on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 and the unique challenges they faced. They talk about the impact of practical elements on their VFX work, the importance of creating scale and believability, and the balance between realism and creativity. We also discuss the collaboration with stunt teams, the adaptation to new camera technology, and the always evolving role of their work in the filmmaking process. They share their experiences in finding creative solutions and maintaining freshness and objectivity, something I'm always interested to ask about. So just so that you know, Jeffrey is the first to speak after me, and Simone is the one with the Italian accent, as you might imagine. So here's my conversation with Jeffrey Sutherland and Simone Coco, VFX Supervisors at ILM on Mission Impossible, and I'll be back at the end for a brief bit of jabbering on. Thanks for joining me, guys. There was a time when a director and their team would sit looking at a script saying, okay, here is our hero fighting on top of a train, or here's our hero jumping a bike off a mountain and speed flying to the ground. And you knew as VFX supervisors, okay, that's entirely in our realm. But with the Mission Impossible movies, it's a little bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you're lucky if you see a script, I think, at a certain point. They definitely do a lot of improvising on location for sure when they're shooting. And to a certain extent, I mean, not obviously this isn't true all the time, but you do a lot of reacting to what they got in camera, I think.
Yeah. But, you know, the fact that these films use a lot in camera, how does that impact? What are the challenges for you in terms of having those kind of practical elements? Does that make your job easier to have something to anchor to, or does that make your job more complex because they're using new cameras that didn't exist even 6 months beforehand?
I think it helped to make it more believable because it's everything, you know, even the reaction of the actor and stuff. If they got something there that they can react to, it does make our life easier. It does make it easier to make you believe everything, you know. And for example, for all the train sequence and stuff, they all shot, you know, everything for real. Then we had to extend, for example, the train with extra carriages. So I altered the environment to match, you know, different locations that they shot to merge into one location. It just, I think it's easy. It's easy for us, I guess.
Everything's really grounded in the physics of the actual shot. You know, if you had to have a camera there as opposed to a virtual camera, you know, it sort of keeps it real, keeps it, you know, basically there's not a lot of guesswork as to what would happen kind of thing. It's, you know, exactly what would happen, and it's about enhancing it from there.
Yeah. I spoke to some of the guys that worked on Andor, and I think it was Mo and Leo in particular that said even if they'd replaced, you know, 90% of a shot that was in camera in Wales at a dam, you know, doubling as a imperial base, just having that anchor there really helped to kind of draw the eye to where you needed to look and where the effects needed to be added. Did you find that with those shots that were shot in Norway and in the other locations for this movie?
Oh yeah, quite a lot. And I guess as well is what the director or what the filmmaker wants to shoot. They got the camera, they go exactly what their focus need to be on, what they need to shoot, and that's get everything easier for us, really.
I guess the one thing that sometimes gets a little more complicated is, if compared to like an all CG shot or something like that, or sequence, where it's quite predictable when you're putting a sequence like that together, that the elements you need to produce, the camera angles, that you can put the camera wherever you want it, and it becomes a little bit more kind of like assembly line, and you can put together the shots that way in a more predictable way. Again, like I was saying about being kind of reactive to what they shoot, you can kind of have a little sequence of shots where where you basically have to see what was captured in camera, and then each shot becomes its own little puzzle a little bit in terms of what's needed to make it work.
Yeah, and I guess having the practical shots and the nature of that means that you get those happy accidents as well that you wouldn't necessarily get if you were doing it all as a visual effect.
Yeah, there's inevitably, I mean, even in the parts, if say you need to maybe use a CG car to remove a camera rig or something like that, or you very often see things in the photography that you really want to hold on to, and so you make an extra attempt to do that, and like whether it's a glint or just whatever it might be, it can be something little that really makes the shot.
Yeah, I think a couple of them, they had a couple of accidents, something, but they kept in the movie because it was, it ended up to be quite nice. That it wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah, it kind of grounds it, doesn't it? It makes it believable for people. And even though, of course, the Mission Impossible team and Paramount are very good at, and Tom Cruise, of course, is very good at publicizing that this stunt has happened, is this big event moment. I think there's a tendency for people these days to just kind of think, well, everything's done with visual effects. But these films, there's now an expectation, isn't there, with these films for people to go and see something that they've not seen before. I mean, I think, I grew up in the 80s. I think of those big moments in the Bond movies, and you'd see a documentary about how somebody actually jumped off the Eiffel Tower or whatever it was. Each time that one of these movies comes out, do you feel the pressure of those expectations to make sure that there's not only bigger moments, but that your work can sweeten those moments as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think, one example of that, I'm thinking about the train sequence, when sort of after the bridge explosion, the train's kind of the bridge is crumbling underneath the train as it kind of makes its way over the edge. And there's shots there that, where the train carriage goes completely vertical and they're just hanging there. And the great part about having built, it was basically a partial build of a giant carriage that they literally suspended and turned vertical, and and it basically gives the perfect platform for the actors to kind of perform the stunts with, to make that totally believable. And then we kind of come in and we have that, like you said, we have that to kind of live up to. Basically, we have a bar that we know we have to hit. There's but we are building a digital carriage to kind of extend that practical carriage, or to do things you can't do with it, if it's not digital. But you have perfect reference in the shot for what it needs to look like. You have the actors having actually, been hanging there off of that piece of the carriage or whatever. And now you're bringing it in, doing it, some sweetening digitally. And, it's, like I said, it's perfect reference. The physics are all there. It's all, kind of makes it easier in some ways, but also does kind of raise the bar on it in terms of the details, photography.
Yeah, and the same thing.
I remember hearing. Sorry, so go ahead, Simone. Sorry.
I was just the same thing for the jump sequence. Tom risked his life to jump, from that mountain, but he made all for real.
Yeah.
They build a ramp. They build a huge ramp on top of the mountain. But we just needed to replace the ramp at the end of it. But everything else was real. So we just had to augment the ramp, but we kept everything as it was, and that make it, an amazing performance.
Yeah, I watched that, the behind the scenes again today, and although I was kind of aware that Tom had done it and he'd done it multiple times, just seeing the scale of that ramp, there's that side-on shot where you just see the drop and you see the ramp and you see this tiny little figure on a bike. And the scale of it is something that's really important in this movie, isn't it? And I think, how do you kind of add to those scenes to kind of build on that scale and make sure that people understand what the characters are going through? Because your job really is to help drive the story, isn't it? And serve the story. What are some of the things that you can do to kind of make something already spectacular even more spectacular? I've kind of asked it already, but I feel like there's something more there.
Well, the goal for us is just making sure that the viewing, the viewers, it doesn't feel there's anything strange. Everything is, you concentrate on the actor, you concentrate on the action that is happening. And that's why, in this, especially in the jump sequence, we went through, there were a few variation of how this mountain was supposed to be, how we created the edge, how we're removing this, the ramp. But I think it's, in a way, it just making sure that the attention is on Tom. Nothing is distracted from it. So it risks his life for it, as I say. So that was our main point. And we had, the team on there, the VFX team and Alex, the visual effects supervisor client. They took hundreds of images and hundreds of the photogrammetry, the top of the mountain, making sure that all the details were in there so we could recreate it and make sure that was all seamlessly integrated.
Yeah, and a couple of details there. The ramp is a clean ramp, so we're adding dust and debris to kind of that it's kicking up as the tires go across the land, that sort of thing. It's a nice little detail. A little bit of suspension mounts was added there just to the lower part of the motorcycle, just to kind of make it that much more believable in terms of the terrain that he was going over, as opposed to the smooth ramp.
Yeah, because you watch those behind the scenes things and there's that red line up the middle of the ramp and Tom is pretty much on it on one shot until he veers ever so slightly a couple of inches to the right. He's a perfectionist and you're adding in imperfections almost to kind of make it believable. So the fantasy is more believable than the reality.
Well, he was probably reading the wind, so he knew.
No, yeah, that only on the bike we only changed we changed the suspension of it, but that was it, just to give a little bit of movement. But that was we kept a bit. Tom and performance we haven't touched all of that.
I remember Steven Spielberg saying to Dennis Muren on E.T., if you can't make it look real, make it look beautiful. Now you have the ability to do both of those things. How do you find that balance? How do you rein that in? Because you're creative people, you're working with a creative team. They want to not show off their skills, but they want to showcase their skills without being distracting. How do you strike that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely consideration. I'm just thinking about like the Norway shots, the shots that we're standing in for the Alps that were shot in the valley in Norway. Those are really beautiful shots, I think. And I think at a certain point, it's some of that photography was shot in Norway and some of it was shot back in the UK. So there had to be a lot of environment work to kind of, basically tie the locations together for those shots. And I think, the team, the environment artists really kind of, on some of those shots really got a chance to really show basically the wide establishing shots of the valley kind of were really beautiful. And they got a chance to show off a little bit there, I think, in those shots for sure.
Mm-hmm. I was also thinking about, I've been reading a lot of history about visual effects, and 200 shots in a film not so long ago was a lot of shots. We're talking upwards of 2,000. I mean, do you know how many in this movie?
Well, I can't remember the total.
Yeah, ILM did, I think it was 1,100 or 1,200. And then on top of that, there were other houses that were involved as well. So as far as the total number, I'm not sure.
But how are supervisors and supervisors? There's several of you. How do you keep a handle on all of that stuff and make sure that not only the pipeline to get the work finished is smooth, but also to all be in sync with each other in terms of the visual nature of the film?
Well, I guess production play a big part of it. I think it keeps us on the line, and then me and Jeff work together quite closely on on some specific shot and making sure that they all they were looking the same things like that. But I think production is the one that it take a big role on that, especially when you got so many shots and then you got the CG supervisor, the 2D supervisor, and they all making sure that everything is looking the same.
Yeah, just a bigger level of complexity than a decade ago, or five, or even a couple of years ago. Yeah,
for sure. And we also had to work pretty closely with some other facilities as well for some of the work, particularly the graphics work that's in the movie, which was done by Blind. And they, I'm thinking there was one scene in particular with literally hundreds of CRT monitors in their kind of command center that all had to be, had to have graphics put in there. And so they worked on the graphics, and we had to do a lot of back and forth of establishing the pipeline for that, and making sure that they were, it wasn't just like 100 times like your standard screen replacement. It was like basically mapping out the graphics across a whole array of monitors. And so that took a lot of collaboration with them for that.
You're collaborating with so many different departments as visual effects supervisors. How is your interaction with the stunt teams, the practical stunt teams that are actually on the ground doing these big stunt moments? Do you have your people on the ground at the same time? Are you there, for instance, in Norway or in the desert when they're riding the horses?
Usually, Alex was on set all the time. So Alex was on set. He was the client supervisor. So he was there for all the old shoot, and he directed and interacted with the team. I did a week while Alex wasn't available, so I did a week on set, just covering him. And but yeah, they always talk to you and stuff, and trying to. But it was all already organized from Alex, so I had that easier job on it.
And that was the same for you, Jeff, as well.
Yeah, and like Simone said, Alex was on set for most of the time, so we weren't out on set very much. And but I know, definitely there was a lot of collaboration with the stunt team for sure. As like I'm thinking a little bit about the driving sequences in Rome, where Tom was doing a lot of that driving. I'm pretty sure he did like all of his driving.
Handcuffed to Haley Atwell, yeah.
But then there was other times when maybe some of the other actors were, that didn't do all, necessarily all their driving. There was a stunt driver rig in the back of the cars that was, was really kind of a cool thing to see. Basically driving from the back seat on those. We did a lot of CG removal on those shots. But yeah, I was just going to say I was pretty amazed though on how much of the driving that Tom actually did.
Yeah, he really does get in there and do what he wants to do. I look at those shots, particularly those ones in the car, of course, and we're so used to, as an audience, understanding that there might be face replacement because we know that can't really be the actor in there because, of insurance reasons or because they don't want to do it and there's a stunt person there to do it for them. Given that his face is there and it's in, he'll screech up to the lens, slam the brakes on and there his face is kind of filling 60% of the frame. Does that mean you can divert your efforts and perhaps budgets to sweeten different parts of the shot because you're not having to replace Tom's face?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and that kind of goes to what I was saying earlier about each shot being its own little puzzle in a way. Just the way that these shots were shot, they're very often multiple rigs on the cars. So it's all to capture Tom doing the stunt, basically, and getting really nice shots of that. But very often, big portions of the car might be covered with a camera rig. So we're going in there and with our digital version of the car and using that to kind of clean the rest of the shot up, basically. That was a big part of our Rome chase sequence work.
Those camera rigs that you mentioned, like I said it earlier on, there were camera rigs used in this film which probably the cameras weren't even available even 2 years before. How does that affect and impact your work? Does it mean you have to rebuild some of your tools to kind of cope with that technology? Are you constantly keeping across the practical camera market?
Yeah, pipeline wise, it definitely has a big effect just in terms of, the number of kind of lenses used and camera backs used. It was pretty immense on this movie, especially with the stretched out production schedule and everything. There were COVID delays and stuff that I think when they kind of picked up shooting again, very often it was a new set of cameras or whatever. And so it was kind of like, the number of combinations of lenses that needed to be, gridded and that sort of thing, and ingestion pipeline, just the mechanics of making, the show run was definitely tricky because of that, for sure.
Yeah, I imagine the recording devices as well for those cameras. There could be all sorts of different codecs potentially, and different formats, different frame sizes, which you then have to kind of build a virtual lens to kind of replace elements in the shots as well. It must be so complex, and the amount of footage, just the sheer amount. If you've got 5 cameras strapped to a Fiat 500, you've got 5 times as much shots as you might have had otherwise. My goodness, I don't envy your work. I'm very interested in your work, but I don't envy your work. I work in live TV. It happens, it's done, and you just kind of dust yourself off and move on to the next thing. During my lifetime, of course, the practical camera shots and visual effects were 2 very separate things. And, we made that suspension of disbelief, didn't we, when we saw a castle on the horizon? We probably knew it was a matte painting by Chris Evans or Mike Pangrazio or one of those guys. These days, and in a way, we sort of look at that work and we admire that work. Your job now, and the job has always been to make your work invisible in VFX, your job now is even more invisible. How does that impact the way you work? Is it like, yes, we made it invisible and nobody noticed that was an effect? I mean, I'm sure there are effects in this movie that people wouldn't even know were visual effects, right?
Probably, yeah. But yeah, I mean, because you got a photo, you got plate photography for everything. So that makes it very difficult for people to know which one is real and which one is not. Our job is making sure that is a success. If people doesn't know that is real, that is a success. If they don't know, they cannot, we spend so much time to make sure that everything match to the plate photography. Every single tree, that their leaves on the tree, everything need to make exactly as it is in there. So I think I personally prefer it when people doesn't know if it's real or not. It means our job is done.
Until you get to award season, and then you can show off a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a particular instance in making this film where you had to find a kind of unexpected creative solution to overcome a particular moment in the movie? Maybe one of those stunts.
I think about it for a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of like you've kind of described every day to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about like the sandstorm sequence. There was a lot of sort of figuring out that stuff. It kind of coming up with solutions for those shots. I think they shot in the desert. And then I think a lot of the challenge for that came with marrying the kind of wider shots with the close-up shots where you're kind of feeling the grit of the sand blowing around, and we're adding elements that they also shot on set as well. And then kind of when you back up and kind of like you get the more establishing shots of the geography is kind of like marrying our digital effects storm in with those close-ups so that, kind of in the sequence, if you remember, it kind of approaches during sequence. It kind of like it kind of descends on the desert town at the same time that Ethan does. And you kind of want all that to kind of like hit at once. And so there's a little bit of choreographing that, kind of balancing the sunlight, the amount of sunlight that you feel kind of burning through the blowing sand, like I said, just making the shots, kind of making the sequence work as a sequence. You're not really thinking about it from shot to shot, but you're feeling it. And there were lots of different kinds of challenges to make that work shot to shot. It wasn't like, apply sandstorm here and then it just works. It's a lot of playing with it to make it feel right.
Mm. And when you're viewing these visual effects as a team, sometimes online, I'm sure, sometimes perhaps in person, you're seeing these things again and again and again and again. You can get to a point where you can't see the wood for the trees. How do you maintain a kind of freshness and a clean set of eyes to look at this, objectively and understand it from the audience's perspective? Do you walk out the room and come back in and just glance at it? Or, is there a technique you use to kind of keep fresh eyes?
That's funny. I think everybody has their own tricks for that kind of thing. I mean, I remember one that Dennis Muren used to do a lot was basically flop the shot. So
Flop the
you've
shot.
looked at it
Yeah.
for months.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Suddenly you flop it and you look at it again and it feels like a brand new shot and you see it in different ways. And it really does kind of loosen things up a bit. It's kind of like tricks like that are kind of good. And then also just, and actually, this was another Dennis Muren thing, not to name drop, but I remember once that when we were, in a show and, we were kind of looking at something, it was kind of a particular problem we were trying to solve. And he basically sent one of the production people out into the hall to just grab the next person walking by
Right.
in the company. It pulled them in to look at the shot.
Somebody else's eyes. Yeah.
He said, what do you think? What do you see? Kind of thing like that. So I think there's just little tricks like that help.
Yeah. Yeah. I've interviewed a number of editors before who've talked about just removing the sound for a moment, just to see if it works, from a geographical point of view. Obviously, you're doing your work without the sounds and without the music. At what stage do you actually get to see those elements integrated into your work, or is it like when you go to the cast and crew screening?
I think it depends on the project really. Sometimes you get the sounds earlier, or sometimes you get the sounds at the end. It varies, I think.
For this one specifically, we didn't have the sound going, for most of the production. It's kind of funny because I mean, some of the things I really loved about this movie was, there are a couple of scenes in particular where the chemistry between the actors is really good. One of them is like the piano drop sequence when there's a lot of suspension building. Another one is the one down in the metro tunnel when the at the end of the Fiat car chase between Haley and Tom. And it was really interesting because, and this is one of the first kind of sequences that I've seen where even without the sound and without knowing what they're saying, you could watch that chemistry and really feel it and kind of, like get it. And I kind of realized that there was some kind of magic happening there a little bit. And it's kind of funny. I would kind of make up what they were saying in my head, but, not knowing what they were actually saying. But, but it actually, you could feel like the scene working even without the dialogue. And then when I actually saw the dialogue, it was awesome. That kind of it paid off for me.
Do you ever have any interaction with the sound department? I know I spoke to some other people that worked on another big movie that worked on the sounds, and their sounds kind of influenced the visual effects in some cases. This was a sci-fi movie, so they were creating sounds that didn't exist. But do you ever have any interactions with the sound department? Is there a two-way street there?
I don't know. On this one, not really. I think we had much to do with sounds because everything was, based. But if you go explosion and things like that, then yeah, to timing the explosion or to timing gunshot, things like that maybe. But on my side, no, we didn't really have much to do with them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I think we would be affecting their work a lot more than the other way around. Just in terms of what we emphasize in a shot.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the pipeline of the movie, doesn't it? What comes first and who's brought on when and all of those things. As a sort of final little fun question, which I usually avoid, but given that we're celebrating your work on this particular movie, there's so many sequences in this film that involve visual effects, like we said, upwards of 2,000 or so. Is there a particular moment that stands out to you as particularly rewarding or challenging? And what made that memorable for you? Why did that scene become memorable for you?
I think the train sequence is huge. It's a long one, so we split that one into we split that one into bits. For me, probably the train crash is one of the challenges and the nice one because they actually show a train, that prop locomotive dropping from a cliff in England, and so we use all the plate photography of the train. We extract the train from all the plates, and we have to recreate the environment of the Killing Bridge in Norway. And that was really fun. There's effects involved in this environment, and it was great fun.
Yeah, for me it was probably the Spanish step sequence in Rome, So like, it's obviously it's quite a long car chase through the streets of Rome. And then one of the kind of highlight moments of it is suddenly on this historic landmark, which they couldn't actually shoot the cars on the landmark itself. So, everything up to it and everything after it is all real, location shots. And we had to kind of create, the a version of the Spanish Steps that, where you're kind of looking off the edge of that location, you're seeing, real Rome. And then, but we shot the steps themselves was done on a backlot, building kind of a full scale, kind of 1/3 of those steps, sort of one flight of those steps. And then, basically just making that seamless with the rest of the location work was pretty fun and rewarding.
Nice. I said that was my last question, but I kind of have one more. When you first saw the footage come back from the stunts, in particular, I'm thinking about the jump. What was your initial reaction when you saw that stuff? Did it kind of blow your mind?
First time I saw that one, yeah, it was like, oh my God. And then they told me that I did I think Tom did 6 times or 7 times, I think, the jump.
Yeah,
I can remember.
In one
and
day,
I was like, oh my, I will die of heart attack just thinking of it.
Yeah, there is something superhuman about that man. I work in Formula One motor racing. I work in the television broadcast, and Tom has actually been in an F1 Red Bull car. And the team actually said if he was a bit younger, he could have been a really good F1 driver. He's just one of those people that has skills for pretty much everything to do with physicality, isn't he? Yeah, amazing. Well, I appreciate your time today, guys. It's been good fun talking to you, and congratulations on another fantastic project. I'm kind of jealous of you because you get to do action, sci-fi, comedy, everything, in your job. It must be very rewarding.
Yeah, it's definitely fun.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, Joey.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Simone and Jeffrey there. Thank you to both of those gentlemen for their time, and to the folks at ILM for lining that up. There's a video version of the conversation coming to YouTube, hopefully with a few clips that go some way to showing the amount of work ILM and the other VFX vendor did on the movie. So keep your eyes open for that one. As with the quick intro, I'm going to make it a quick outro. Thanks for another year of support. Remember, you can continue to support the podcast on patreon.com/Jamie Benning, or by buying our book, The Return of the Jedi, Unauthorized Timeline, on Amazon in your region. Happy New Year to you all. Thanks for a great 2023. Lots more to come from Filmumentaries in 2024. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you can do so for the next episode of the Filmumentaries podcast.